Hey everybody, it's Coach K, and I'm on spring break down in Texas. Everybody's out of town, and I'm looking forward to some quiet time doing some sketching. And what I'm going to do today is show you some techniques for incorporating kind of new and different maybe types of vignettes. We're used to the rectangles and the circles, and they serve their purpose. They're great. But we've got faux shadows that we can work with. We have contextual vignettes that we can work with, basically just to frame the sketch and have it kind of jump off the page a little bit. And what I'm going to use today, someone had asked me about transportation design, if I had ever done any of that. Well, I've never designed a car, but I've done a lot of vehicles in my day, from fire trucks to dump trucks to city buses, riding lawnmowers, you name it. So I took this cherry picker. It was parked on the side of the road while we were on a road trip. You can see it's kind of a very rough thumbnail sketch. And so I'm going to kind of resurrect that and incorporate that as part of this digital sketch lesson, essentially. So let's get sketching. All right, so here's the thumbnail sketch I showed you in the intro. It's a little cherry picker. It's actually made by a company called Snorkel, and I came back and I put together a quick sketch and tried a different rendering technique at the time, which was just blocking in color. You only see a few gradations in there, one maybe in a wheel well, and then one right on top where that grate is. But otherwise, I was just laying in some unique details and trying different rendering techniques. But for this video, I've got an underlay that I used. I have an underlay that I created, and it's a rear 3/4 perspective view. And so I wanted that to complement the first one that I did, but I also wanted to explore a different vignette for this one. The other one, as I said, had kind of blocked in color. This one I want to make a little bit more emotive. I'm thinking maybe trying to do something contextual to where maybe there's kind of like dirt flying, or you kind of show it in its environment without getting too outlandish with the rendering and the time investment. So I'm looking for quick techniques, and I'll probably use the textured watercolor brushes, which are really kind of fun to work with. They give your sketches a really different look from the absolute traditional industrial design sketches. So we're going to try that out. But here you can see I'm just laying in some line work. I'm using both some tools in Sketchbook, like the ellipse guide and the ruler, but I'm also using the predictive stroke to try to maximize the efficiency. And the beauty of digital sketching in this form is, as you see here, is I can actually select and correct my perspective. I can rearrange the wheel placement, which I've done kind of extensively. Initially on my underlay I did it some, but then I came back in with this sketch and also corrected that. So now what's the feeling that I want the sketch to have? Well, I really, as you've heard me say in previous videos, I really like that line between rough sketch and rendered, right? So you have that implied realism. It looks like it could be real, but it's clearly a concept. So that's kind of what I'm going for here. And one of the best ways I've found to do that is to include both bucket fills, color, but also a lot of hatch line work. And so I'm trying to find ways that they work together well to really convey the fact that, hey, I'm a concept. So I use the other traditional tools for communication, like contour lines I just laid in, and I'm going around and I'm just throwing in random details, right? So the overall kind of architecture, so to speak, of this vehicle is established, but now what are the details that I can put in there that will like make it further look realistic, right? But in a very timely fashion. So I've kind of settled on the textured watercolor brushes as providing this kind of rugged look to it. It looks kind of like dirt or dirt flying. I kind of imagine, I mean, this type of vehicle can go anywhere, right? But I just wanted to give it some context. But even now, as you see me laying in color around, I'm working around the sketch, and I'm building those colors and those shades of gray, trying to stay kind of monochrome, but I'm building it up in layers, and I'm just painting on very loosely, right? And that contributes to that look of being kind of a rough sketch. But as you'll see as I go along, there's certain levels of fidelity that I incorporate, whether it's slight details around the light, the rear light, as I'm showing right now. Instead of just a field of red, I'm going to actually put in some tonal difference in there, both highlights and lowlights, to kind of give it some life. And I think what I'll do is give this whole sketch some kind of directional aspect, meaning the vehicle's moving. And you can see on that the front left tire is actually turned, and so that's kind of implying motion. And so now I'm throwing kind of trailing lights, kind of fading lights that are trailing behind the vehicle. And so I think all that kind of contributes a little bit. And then the other thing that I'm doing is using a little bit of the airbrush to kind of bounce some of that red off of, say, the fenders or other faceted areas of the design. And again, that's just to kind of enhance a little bit of the realism to it. Around the wheels now, I don't, traditionally automotive designers don't spend a whole lot of time on wheels because they actually have people that design wheels, and also the tread of the tire, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm just throwing in enough detail to where you go, oh, that looks kind of realistic. So maybe it's a little bit of shadow, maybe it's a little bit of highlight in there, but I'm not spending an exorbitant amount of time with detail here. Just enough to kind of trick the eye into thinking, wow, that looks realistic. But basically, you can see how I'm using the layer structure to organize all the features on this sketch, and I'm building it up with blocks of monochrome grays, right? So it's a really efficient way to work. You've heard me mention in other videos where I will go in and select areas and actually do bucket fills of black, and then be able to play with the opacity levels. Certain things about this textured watercolor kind of dirt vignette, I'll call it, is too that I can go in and just suggest a tire tread. Again, that's just another layer of enhancement. It's kind of it's a stylistic implementation, right? And I think each one of you, as you develop as designers, will have certain characteristics in your sketches that belong to you, right? Maybe you've borrowed them from other people. I certainly have. People that I've worked with along the way that have been great sketch artists and designers. We often exchange ideas, and we'll borrow from each other to get kind of, depending on the sketch exercise that we're doing or the product that we're designing, we'll try new things too. So that's what we're doing here. We're looking for new ways to kind of convey an emotion around the sketch and make it jump off the page, as you've heard me say many times. These are just new techniques that I'm trying out, and we can, if you want to, I would love to, if you put in the comments down below after watching the video, give me your thoughts, give me some ideas of what you'd like to see, because that's what we're all about here, is just trying to figure out new ways we can find sketches that other people have done and try to figure out how they did it, right? And we can break it down. We can do our little sketch autopsy on it and figure out how things were done. But back to this sketch now. I'm nearing the end of what I want to do with this particular perspective view, and I'm just making sure that I'm building up enough contrast in here to where the various surfaces and parts, components of this vehicle read well. And as I go along, I'm thinking more and more about compositing this with that original sketch that I did, which was the front 3/4 view. And so I'll be getting into that in just a moment, but in the meantime, I'm just doing the last touches. I'm doing some bucket fills, as you'll see here, boom, black, adjust the opacity. And of course, those are all done on separate layers that I've labeled. And sometimes I will go in and I'll group them based on areas or parts of the vehicle, like the wheels or the main body, etc. Now we've got a couple just highlights I'm throwing in there. A lot of that just helps jump, and it kind of lends an element of excitement to the sketch. It also helps separate parts from each other, right? If you have a low light, maybe a recess combined with a highlight on a neighboring part, that's naturally going to create that separation on the page. So I decided that I wanted that oval plate to rest down into a recess. So you can see how I've done that, and I'll put a little bit of shade on that recessed rim to kind of help punch that out as well. Add a little bit more hatch work along the way, adjust further opacity levels to make sure, as I said, that's the beauty of working in this method, is just that you can always go back and adjust as you need to. A few more adjustments, just trying to lend a little bit of realism through some kind of reflective surfaces on that tail light. I mean, if you can call it that. I'm not even sure this type of vehicle really has a tail light, because it certainly doesn't, it's not street worthy. So, but it's in there for effect. It's in there for a level of excitement. Here I'm going to put in, normally I'd put in a logo. I use Lux as kind of a standby placeholder. In this case, I was thinking this would be kind of autonomous, so this is kind of a numeric indication of the 17th autonomous unit. But I'm just going to throw it in there, and I'm going to drop the opacity to where maybe you don't even see it. It's not really strong at first, but again, implied realism, right? Vehicles have model numbers, vehicles have names, and their logos, the company logos, are on there as well. So just giving an indication of that. That's really pretty much the sketch right there. What I wanted to do, though, is show you the composited version, and also I decided ultimately, since the original version had a lot of orange accents, I adjusted the red to be more orange in color. So here it is on white. I work a lot on white, a lot of negative space. But then I tried another technique where I put in a very light gray background, and I really like this. You can see I referenced back to the rectangular vignettes, but with a gradation in it. So those areas may be good for text or titles that you could use later on. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed it.